You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, listeners, we have a very special holiday treat for you today because we have DEBBIE MACOMBER with us, and you will know her because of her beautiful stories and her Christmas stories that have been on the Hallmark movie channel for so many years now. But I want to tell you a little bit about DEBBIE before we get started. And DEBBIE, welcome. So happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So let me tell you some things that you may not even know about DEBBIE MACOMBER. She is a #1 New York Times best-selling author and one of today's most popular writers. She has more than 200 million copies of her books in print worldwide. In her novels, you will notice that DEBBIE brings to life compelling relationships that embrace family and enduring friendships and uplifting readers with stories of connection and hope, which is something that we all so desperately need. So DEBBIE's novels have spent over 1,000 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. She is celebrated as the official storyteller of Christmas. Her annual Christmas books are beloved, and 6 have been crafted into original Hallmark Channel movies, as I said earlier. She is also the author of the best-selling Cedar Cove series, which you will remember was the Hallmark Channel's first dramatic scripted television series. It won a lot of accolades. It was very popular. Cedar Cove was a ratings favorite. It ran for 3 full seasons. I remember it and loved it. DEBBIE also has published 3 best-selling cookbooks, 2 adult coloring books, numerous inspirational and nonfiction works, and 2 acclaimed children's books. As if this isn't enough, she so graciously serves on the Guidepost National Advisory Cabinet, the YFC National Ambassador. She is a World Vision International spokesperson for their Knit for Kids charity initiative. She is a devoted grandmother. She lives with her husband, Wayne, in Port Orchard, Washington, which just happens to be the town inspired by the Cedar Cove series. And isn't that a wonderful thought? DEBBIE, we're absolutely overjoyed to have you here with us. We're going to talk about your beautiful Christmas book, The Christmas Spirit, just in time for this holiday season. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
We are too, DEBBIE. Well, I'd like to give our listeners just a very short description of what the book is about. I don't give away any spoilers. If you want to add anything at the end, by all means, please do.
Okay.
But we're here to talk about the Christmas spirit, which we absolutely adored. And in this story, 2 lifelong friends, Peter and Hank, decide to trade lives the week before Christmas. Now, Peter and Hank are a study in opposites in some respects. Peter's a local pastor. He juggles a lot. He's meeting with people. He is handling issues with the congregation, budget matters, property matters. He is preparing a live nativity for the Christmas season. And of course, all the study and thought that goes into preparing his sermons. Hank is a bar owner. He serves everyone at his bar, including members of the local biker gang and other individuals with all different life circumstances. Now, when Peter scoffs that Hank has it easy compared to him, the 2 decide to switch jobs until Christmas Eve. And to their surprise, the responsibilities of a pastor and a bar owner may not be that dissimilar. Peter and Hank had expectations, and we just love to see how some of those expectations went by the wayside as the book progresses. Now, as they see each other in a new light, they also discover potentially a new love to cherish, and their lives are forever changed. This story, to us, one of the reasons we loved it is because it really did celebrate some of the true meaning of the holiday, and especially this idea of a community spirit that binds us all. It was just lovely. Did you want to add anything, Debbie?
Well, I wanted to say that the title comes from the fact that Hank and Peter are both dealing in spirits. So the Christmas spirit. So I had so much fun. I interviewed our pastors before I wrote the book, and our pastor was the one that suggested in part of the one of the opening scenes is when Peter is at the bar, and of course he can't pour the beer fast enough to satisfy everybody, but and he doesn't want anybody to know that he's the pastor. And so I got the idea from my own pastor, who said that uh, never tells people that he's a pastor when he meets them. He says he's a professor of Mideastern literature.
I love that.
It's a very catchy title. It warms your heart, but now you're telling us it has another meaning, which is very, very genius, very brilliant, that double spirit meaning. I just love it. I have to say that it's just such a wonderful story. I want to say to our readers, it's going to fill you with so much joy, this little story. I felt like you showed the reader in these two characters that nobody's perfect. And you also showed us that sometimes opposites attract. The character Grace Ann, who I loved, by the way, she worked at the church as the secretary. She had made a list of everything she wanted in a husband. It was hard to meet a single man in that small town. But that specific list didn't seem to be helping her much. In fact, it was holding her back. And without giving away any spoilers, Grace Ann ended up with someone who was really nothing like the fantasy man on her list of criteria. Was she caught up, do you think, in the attributes of a person but missing the most important part, which is their heart? And what were you, as a writer of this beautiful character, trying to show all of us, maybe even in the real world, about the danger of having too many strict requirements?
I just so enjoyed writing this book. There is rarely a time, the book almost wrote itself. I could hardly wait to get to my computer every day just to write this book. And I loved Grace Ann because I saw myself in her in so many ways. You know, we feel like we have to have this perfect little home, this perfect little life. And I can remember when we moved and we were searching for churches, I had this list of requirements that I wanted for the church. You know, I wanted a good solid children's program. I wanted an adult a Bible study. I had this big long list, and I'm sharing it with my friend, and she looks at me and she says, "Debbie, that's heaven." This is Grace Ann's problem. She has her head way out of joint because she's looking for somebody that's not perfect. I mean, who's perfect, and there's nobody that's going to ever meet up to her standards. Mm-hmm. And plus, she's got a little broken heart too.
Yes, that made her very endearing because there was a reason why she had those strict requirements. She wanted to make sure the next time around her heart wasn't going to be broken. Yeah. And some of her requirements were good. I think some of them were good. I just loved that you sort of showed us that love doesn't sometimes meet requirements. Sometimes the heart doesn't think like the mind thinks. It just falls in love.
Well, she's so against her brother being in a tavern. She's afraid it's going to ruin his reputation. If anybody in town finds out that, this will be the end of his career, especially if one old woman in the church who holds the purse strings finds out about this, it could be the end of the new roof. And, so there's all of that. And of course, then there's Hank, who's this free spirit, the guy who's friendly, listens to everybody at the bar. And, so the juxtaposition of the two, he's got his Thursday afternoon poker game set and doing it in the church building. And of course, Grace Ann is just absolutely horrified. Not only that, it's time for her to have her missionary society meeting.
I
there's
really
all
loved
the-
that. I loved that part of the story too. I loved it. I don't want to tell our readers too much because I want them to discover it on their own. But there's a lot of quirky little twists and turns that are a lot of fun with these characters.
I think
I
two of
agree.
my favorite characters were Walt and Rowdy.
Yes.
And they were the guys that sat at the bar and just commented about everything going on around them.
I thought they were great.
Me too.
I think I know a Walt and a Rowdy. I wanted to ask you, one of your characters was very intentional about not using his faith to judge others. And he tried to show what he believed rather than hit people over the head with it. In fact, as you mentioned, he even went to great lengths to hide what he did for a living, which I thought that was actually a very funny scene. In today's world, with its distractions and with the noise that is going on, do you think that people still notice when somebody is quietly living out their faith?
Oh, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. I just had dinner with a good friend of ours who is the CEO of Youth for Christ. And he brought us a homemade loaf of sourdough bread. Now, you just wouldn't think about Dan baking bread. And I don't know if you've ever made sourdough bread, but it's quite a process. I mean, just the rising of it takes 18 hours before it's risen enough to, I mean, an involvement. It's a task. And he brought us the bread. And later on, I thought, my goodness, here is this wonderful man of God who brings the bread of friendship, who serves the bread of life.
Oh.
And I just thought, it was such just a warm feeling that he would bring us this loaf of bread.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, no matter what faith you subscribe to, I think it is very important to want people to engage with you and talk with you about what it is you believe and why. And your characters did such a good job of being inviting and getting to know people in the process and listening to people. And I thought that was such a very important aspect to your book.
God put me in the contemporary market. This is the first book, by the way, I've ever written that takes place in the past. I mean, it's the grandmas are explaining the story, and it takes place in the 70s. And so that was going back for me because I lived the 70s, and so that was a really fun aspect of the book. And I had to do a little bit of research along the way, which I do with almost every book, but in a different way. So, and the idea came to me of having the grandmothers or the grandma tell the story to the grandchildren, because they wanted Lance, the grandson, does not want a story that starts like a fairy tale. He wants a story that says, in the beginning. So she tells him an in the beginning story.
Mm-hmm. And then Lance throughout kept saying, please, no kissing. There's not going to be any kissing in this story, is there? But the little girl wanted there to be kissing, and I thought that was just so cute. I love the character. I just love these characters, Pastor Peter and Hank, the tavern owner. I love that they were friends. And I love that they had two very, very different jobs. The one thing that I thought about them was, though, they both had a love for people. To work in a tavern and serve people all day long, and to want to make conversation and to talk about people's problems. Same thing with the pastor, trying to help people. And I just love that you showed that people from very different backgrounds can be friends. And so, as Kristen described in the story, Peter and Hank assumed each other's jobs were easy and maybe even not as important as their own. But when they switched positions, they found otherwise. And I just felt, as the reader, it was so comforting that we should all be cautious in judging one another. And that you brought these two unlikely characters and showed us how much they had in common. And I wondered, you as the writer, what were you thinking about humankind when you wrote these two characters? And maybe our common needs and wants and desires from all different backgrounds.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I just love the whole idea of the two of them realizing their position in the community and their position in life. Peter didn't want anybody to know he was a pastor because he was afraid that they wouldn't talk to him, that they would reserve, that would take business away, and so he tried to hide that he was just a replacement. He was taking over. And whereas Hank, oh, I just loved Hank. In many ways, I just saw him as one of the best Christians I've ever met, because he was so open and so willing and accepting of everybody. And when he confronted somebody that was supposed to be holy, he couldn't take it because he found that, in fact, I think at one point he says she has a heart disease, and it's because she had no forgiveness in her heart. And so, he was a really good picture. And I think both of them showed, they had grown up together. And I think so many of the friendships we have in life, it is really, the link is strong. The friends, I still have friends that I went to school with. I mean, when I was in grade school, and those links are strong. And I think both Hank and Pete were determined to keep those links no matter what their jobs were.
And it was very wonderful that they supported each other's jobs, even though they were so different, that they would even consider switching and doing each other's job. And then when they got there, they wanted to do a good, they wanted to help their friend. They didn't want to sabotage it. They didn't say, this is ridiculous. They thought, I'm going to come here and I'm going to really help him make a difference, and I'm going to learn this job. And I loved that just their inherent goodness in each of them really was wonderful.
So you can imagine how Grace Ann, the church secretary, felt about her brother entertaining girls from the strip club, in the tavern. And I have a friend, and she actually does this, but her church has a ministry to the strip club. They go in, they give the girls pedicures. Her job, she bakes them cupcakes every month. And that reaching out. So we as Christians, and we sometimes just put ourselves in a bubble. And I really wanted to show in a way that was fun and amusing, that we could just break out of our bubbles and we'd be so much more effective as Christians.
I loved it. I laughed right out loud several times, but it also touched my heart in a serious way too. And you're so right. I think that you showed us through these characters that more important than judging and criticizing is this task just to love each other, to really genuinely love each other.
Yeah.
And it was a lesson that I got out of this lovely story. Thank you.
Yeah. I love it when it has a message. A story has a message. I want all my books to have a message. When I come up with an idea, and I probably have shared this at the writer conference that you attended, Chris, but I come up with words that align with the premise. So the story has to be provocative. I want my readers to think when they read the story. It has to be relevant to their lives. It has to be told in the most creative way I can think to tell it. It has to be realistic, and it has to be entertaining.
Yeah. I love that. You hit every single one of those, Debbie, and even more, because we could relate to the characters. We grew attached to the characters, sort of felt what they felt, wanted what they wanted, and you brought the reader right into the story, and it was just a real treasure.
I find it so interesting because people will often say to me that they love the way I describe things. And I am the worst description writer in the universe. I mean, to me, I'm a storyteller. So it's just important for me to get the story down. In fact, I wrote one book and my editor said, there's not one word of description about the characters. And I thought, oh, do I have? Because to me, that's not really part of the story. And the readers, it's so funny because the mail I get, they say, really love the way you describe that person. Well, I probably said they have blue eyes, or something. But the reader will make that form the picture in their own mind, And I think there's something you alluded to here, Chris, is that there is a link between the author and the reader. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to say it's magical. I don't want to say it's spiritual, but there is a link because I know if I laugh, my reader will laugh. And if I cry, my reader will cry. And if I put my heart on the page, it links with theirs. And I hear that again and again and again from the mail that I get, or, what a good description. Or I felt myself just part of that story, so they were right there with me, just as I was writing the book.
And that's a gift. It's a gift that not everyone can do. You have it. You're using it. It's your passion. I always say your passion is your gift, is what you love to do, and you're good at it. Just goes round and around, and you're sharing it with the world, and we're very grateful.
Debbie, you are known for many things, and I think one of them too is your focus on relationships and the importance of them. But there's one relationship that really caught my eye in your story, and that is the relationship between Peter and Hank that you alluded to earlier. They worked at it. They made time for one another over the years. They met at a restaurant to catch up on one another and see what was happening in each other's lives. And I was wondering if you could just comment a little bit about the importance of these male friendships that many times men don't invest that time in developing. And, what are some of the ways that we invest in people and build up those relationships for the future?
Well, first of all, I think friendship is intentional. It has to be intentional because unless you stay in touch, unless you reach out, unless you meet and have time together, it just fades. It just fades. There are seasons for friends, different friends. Men seem to have more problems with this than women. And I think part of my role as Wayne's wife is to help him make that connections. Like his friends, most of his friends are ones that he grew up with, that he's very close to over the years. And it's the wives that connect and bring the guys back together. And I think that's kind of our role because men seem to get lost in their own little worlds. And I think it's our role as mates to help them broaden that.
Yeah. And I think they too might be a little tentative about reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to do such and such with me?
Right.
And I've heard that from a lot of men where they want to do an activity, but they're not sure how to go about it. And so your characters, I think, did a really good job of being intentional, as you were talking about,
Yeah.
which is great.
I loved every second of it. And the whole Christmassy scene and everything that was going on with the Christmas nativity scene, and I don't want to give anything away, and the pageant, and it's just such a beautiful book. I want our readers, you've got to read this beautiful The Christmas Spirit by Debbie Macomber, and it's going to take you into such a beautiful little town and a wonderful little place, and it's going to warm your heart like all of her books do. And Debbie, I thank you for joining us today. Can you give us any clue what you're working on next? What's on your radar?
Well, I just finished a book and it's called Must Love Flowers. And it's about a widow who is, because of COVID, has almost become a recluse. And it's her breaking out of that mold and coming back into the world. So, Must Love Flowers.
I love the title. It sounds very special. We can't wait to get a hold of that one. And listeners, you're going to want to connect with Debbie Macomber. You can find her on her website. She has a newsletter there that you can subscribe to. She's also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest. All sorts of ways you can connect with Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been just an absolute pleasure. We have loved your writing for such a long time. It's been a joy meeting you and diving deep into this wonderful story.
It was my honor. Thank you both so much. God's blessings.
Yes, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Debbie Macomber has a gift for writing, and that is why she has 200 million copies of books sold all over the world, and 6 Hallmark movies, and the original Hallmark television series, and what a joy it was talking to her today. So many things came up that I wish we could have talked to her a little bit more. One of my first questions was just so interesting to me about how she took I can't give away the spoiler, but there's two couples in this story that are opposites, very much opposites. You would never put them together. And what is this about life that is sort of fun in a way when opposites are attracted to one another? But why does this happen so much?
I don't know, because this is one of those things I think can go both ways. First of all, opposites are interesting and exciting. It's somebody who moves you a little bit out of your comfort zone. You know, you're trying new activities or a hobby that you never considered before, and hey, that's kind of fun. But this is where you can get into difficulty, because if the opposites are values, and now you have opposite values to the person that you are dating and potentially marrying or in a long-term relationship with, I think that only leads to a lot of disappointment. So what is opposite, I think, is more important than the fact that it's opposites attracting.
I see what you're saying. Yes, if you have too great of differences and you're never going to agree on most things in life, that's going to be a problem. I think in this story it was more an opposite, meaning something that you don't, a talent, a gift, a way to perceive something that you don't have in you that someone else has, and in that way that person completes you. That kind of an opposite. Like, I don't know anything about certain subjects, but my partner does. So now when we get together, we have double the knowledge. Or I'm not as an empathetic person, but my partner is. So when we come together as a couple, I tap into that and learn from that.
Right, but now what if the opposite is, I believe in saving money and not being frivolous, but my partner is the exact opposite and really doesn't believe you should think about 30 years from now, and you should go out and enjoy your money now and go on vacations even if you maybe can't afford it. Or child rearing. You know, I believe in punishment. I believe in incentivizing. See, this is where the opposites, I think, get really, really tricky in a relationship.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
well, let me ask you, Chris, speaking of relationships, have you ever made a list of attributes that you would like to see either in a mate or in a job? Did you ever make one of those lists?
No, I never did. I'm a list maker. I have a list going every single day. So did my dad. I have a list of things to do, and I get a great pleasure crossing things off that list because I am not a procrastinator. But I am a very big lover of people. I love pretty much everybody. I just do. I don't look for any prerequisites in friendship or anything. I just don't. It's all a heart thing with me. So far, it's gone pretty well, thank goodness, but it can be very dangerous because I open my heart up immediately to all kinds of people. It runs in my family. It's in my DNA. It was in my whole Swedish side. My uncle was known for loving everybody, having everybody over for every occasion. My door is always open. There is nobody that I don't like. There's some people I've had to set boundaries, but there's nobody I can say that I really don't like. So I don't have those prerequisites. I don't know. Maybe it depends on the person. Maybe it depends on not who you're looking for. Maybe it depends on that individual person, whether you need to set some prerequisites. And like Grace Ann, if you were hurt in the past, maybe you need to.
Yeah, I absolutely. In fact, I did make a list along these lines when I was about 22. And then proceeded to violate everything that I put on the list and went the opposite way, which maybe that wasn't a good thing. But I now realize how different my list would look like now versus the 22-year-old list. And there are prerequisites in terms of somebody that I would marry or have a long-term relationship with. And you don't realize how important some of those fundamentals are until you have life experience behind you. Because now I want to know how somebody regards money, how they treat their mother, what kind of discipline did they see in the house, what kind of relationship and conflict resolution skills did they see demonstrated in the house. Because these are the things that now can derail a marriage or a relationship. And if you have the opposite things on a list and you're really stuck to that list like Grace Ann, you really are missing out on some things that could rock your life later.
That's true. But you're coming from maybe some past hurts too, where you are wiser now to know that you better make a list. And I have a couple single friends right now who are looking to date someone, and they have a list. They do, because they don't want to. Well, you reach a certain age and you don't want to make the same mistake over and over. We've had a couple authors on here, I'm not going to name who have said to us that they got out of a bad relationship and purposefully made a list so that they would not go back to that same person. Because in your DNA, I think even, you're inherently attracted to certain types of people. You just are. But in your mind, that may not be the best match for you. So do you remember we had a couple that said, I had to make a list and say, okay, here's who I want to date. No, I'm going for this person on this piece of paper. And then it worked out well for them. Yeah. This is kind of fun talk about.
We had a good discussion. In fact, I remember Lisa Scottolini. We had an incredible discussion with her about things you've learned from those past relationships.
And Kate White, second husband.
That's right.
And she has her second husband, and she said the same thing. She had to purposely say no to herself.
Yeah.
So this is interesting about this little list. I don't know. I kind of like it. I'm not against it or for it. I'm just saying I don't have it. Also, that was a great discussion. I just love talking to Debbie Macomber. And readers, you're going to want to get this little Christmas book. It's just very special. It's a treasure. It's even, I really feel this is a little Christmas spirit story that you could pass down to your kids and your grandkids, because the story starts with the grandmother telling this story to her grandkids. It's just very heartwarming, isn't it, Kristen?
Very much so.
And so I just want to say thanks for listening. We have an incredible lineup ahead. We have Shelby Van Pelt with Remarkably Bright Creatures, Pam Jenoff, codename Sapphire, Barbara Kingsolver, Demon Copperhead, Lisa Unger, Secluded Cabin Sleep 6, Scott Turow with Suspect. And we want to give a shout out before we log off, because you know I have to. Very grateful to this guy, our incredibly talented sound engineer / producer, the Mr. Mark Carey. Mark, thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. We'll see you again next week.
He's the brains behind pretty much everything we do here, and we're grateful for this young guy. And thanks for joining us.
In the meantime, listeners, stay on the radar with Bookstorm by visiting our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can visit us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Look at our TikToks. They are so fun. And if you'd like to see us in person, or better yet, one of our amazing authors, you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and podcast, and we should come right up. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.